So, I'm going to start off this video by saying I am nervous that this message might be perceived differently by a lot of people, and people may have their different opinions about it, but this is also based on my own experiences with racism and just inequality here in the country. I know that a lot of people, if you're black, you have experienced this, whether it's directly or indirectly at some point in your life. And I think that now is really the time to just bring light to everything from every angle, no matter how small or big. I see the protests on TV, and it's so admirable to know that there are people out there um, that's really just that's speaking out against a lot of things. And these are people from, it's not just black people, just all walks of humanity. It's a beautiful thing. And I really don't have no room to be nervous or anything like that. It's just, I'm mainly speaking out because I don't want to just reap the benefits of my people's hard work. I think that there are people that are nervous about it, but to stay silent about anything, you're contributing more to the cause. I mean, you're contributing more to the problem than you are of the cause. Um, so, with that being said, I'm going to start with just my story of, being racially discriminated against. And I actually have three stories, really. And I'm going to try to make the first two short because the last one is what I really want to make a point on. But my first experience with racism was actually when I was 14 years old. And like I said, racism, it can happen small or big. Sometimes you don't even know that you're a victim of it. Um, if you're black or you're any other than white. And I probably have experienced it, but I wasn't aware of it. So it was probably indirect, but I can say that the first impactful event of me experiencing racism was when I was 14 years old. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and of course that's the South for people that's not from America or don't really know. It's pretty much the heart of a lot of the racism that's happening over here in the country. Um, Places like Tennessee, Alabama, all these places, Georgia, and whatnot. And making the long story short, I live pretty much in an area. It's not exactly suburban anymore. It's kind of suburban, but at the same time, not really. But I live in a neighborhood that was back in the day predominantly white. And now you see where the demographics have kind of changed in the neighborhood, where you have more blacks than you do of whites. And then if there are any whites left, they're pretty much just like on this one street. And that street, it's somewhere around towards the lake. Um, that's one thing that happened back in the day. Is a lot of white people, they decided to move out of the city and go to those suburban areas like Collierville, Germantown, and so sort like that. So now the neighborhood that I live in is predominantly black, with the exception of the few houses that are around the lake. But I remember walking to the lake, as I do all the time. And this was when my dog was probably like a year or two old. So it was back in 2000, had to be like 2007 or so. I know that I was somewhere going into 10th grade, but I usually walk my dog around to the lake. And there was a guy, he was in a boat, white guy in a boat. And I saw them from the other side of the lake, and there was two black guys. There was two black guys on the other side, and I had my headphones on. I'm working out, just walking my dog, and I see commotion on the other side of the lake where they are just yelling and whatever else. And being me, 14 years old, I didn't really think too much of it. I thought maybe they were yelling and arguing about a football game or something like that and whatever else, and being guys, you know. So it was two black guys and that one white guy that was in the boat. And after a little bit, I could hear the yelling through the music of what I was listening to. I know I was listening to the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack. And so I do remember that distinctly. But, you know, I'm over there just minding my business, and probably about 20 minutes or so later, he comes, the white guy in the boat, he comes over towards where I am. And me, I'm the type of person, I'll say hey to just anybody. Like, I don't really care. Like, you know, I'll say hi, you know. But also being young at the time, I didn't really, yeah, I didn't really care like how he was doing. I was just like, hey, how you doing? Whatever, like that. And you know, he started to say some things, but I just nodded like I knew what he was talking about or something like that. And, you know, because I still was listening to my music, teenagers, I was still listening to my music and everything. And, you know, he was just saying some stuff and blah, blah, blah. But I noticed his behavior was kind of weird, you know. I thought he was coming over to ask me, like, if I was fishing, like, how was the fishing or something like that, as I always do. Um, but it reached a soft point in my music where the music it just got pretty dim, and I loudly and distinctly heard him call me a nigger. And I take off my headphones, like, wait, what? And I was like, wait, huh? I asked you how you was doing. He was like, yeah, and I come over here to run your black ass away from here. And it was just like a punch in the face, because I was like, whoa, I've never experienced at that time anything like that. So I mean, it's kind of like now looking back on it, but at the time it was like heart sinking. Like, this is really happening. But he just went on this long type rant talking about you know, the mayor at the time, how they was gonna nail his black ass to the wall and this and that, and he's sick of us, and he just called me pretty much anything but a child of God. You know how it goes. But the most frightening thing is his behavior. He was acting very radical, just very out of the way norm. Um, and he kept reaching down in his boat for something, like he was conflicting with himself whether he should get it or not. So he kept reaching for something in his boat, and he finally picked it up, and he just aimed it. And I saw it was a double barrel sawed off shotgun. So I just immediately backed out, you know, called my dog, and I walked away. I mean, I didn't tell, when I got home, I didn't tell my folks that part. I didn't tell my mama that part, but I just said that there was a racist white guy around the neighborhood with a peg leg, yellow sunglasses, and no shirt on. And everybody kind of thought I was crazy. One of the neighbors, though, didn't really, it just sounded something so bizarre, like out of a actual like out of some old time racist movie, like dirty deep south movie, and how I described it. But one of the neighbors actually knew who I was talking about, because they had heard from somebody else that there was a racist white guy walking around the neighborhood threatening black people, all this other kind of stuff. And you know, it kind of brushed off. I wouldn't say it exactly brushed off. It was just more like, okay, be careful, this and that, because we don't know the whole details of the story. But but yeah, and being young and impetuous and being, you know, just whatever, I had in my mind that I wanted to put a stop to this. And about 2 days later, I went back to the lake. A lot of people will be like, oh, girl, that's a death sentence. Why would you even do that? Like, I'd stay completely away. But, um, but I went back to the lake and hoping to, you know, come across the guy, call 911, whatever like that, and, you know, just put this guy away. Well, I go back to the lake with my sister-in-law and my nephew, who at the time was like 1 years old. And you know, really, we just was around there having a good time, whatever else. And I didn't tell her the reason I went there. I mean, because usually that's my routine. I go to the lake, walk my dog, but of course, I thought maybe the guy would show back up. And sure enough, he did. We were out on the island of our lake. We have a big lake, and then we have an island. And we were over there at the time, but her car was parked on the mainland. And he drove up in his, I think it was like a yellow Cadillac like vehicle. It was like a rustic, old time looking vehicle, this and that. But he drove past the lake. He came to a hard stop. He backed up and went over the ramp. That the driveway is kind of like a ramp. He went over there. His car literally went inches off the ground and landed in the dirt. He started honking his horn like loud and hard and just yelling like, "Where you at? La la la!" This and that, and just yelling crazy. Like you would literally think that you were in one of those old time films. It was like, whoa. And she said, "You know what, Alex, don't say shit. You just come on, let's go, this and that." And he saw us walking from the island across the bridge, and he backed up his car and he came right there on the side of the street. And as we're walking by, he started just yelling all kinds of crazy racial things. He had the shotgun on the other side of his on the driver's side, his left side, but he also had a pistol on his passenger seat. And we're walking past, we're not saying anything to him, but he's yelling a whole bunch of just racial slurs, everything like that. And one thing that distinctly stood out to me is he pointed out my nephew, who is literally 1 year old, and he said, "I'm gonna blow that little motherfucker's head smooth off." We just kept, my sister-in-law at this point is just crying, and I'm actually calling 911, and I'm giving them the description of the vehicle, the guy, the license plate number, all of that kind of stuff. And you know and just carrying out with what what I came there to do. And they actually came with the SWAT team and everything, because plot twist, there had already been reports on the guy in the neighborhood. The neighbors that lived, that his neighbors would report him going late at night. We're talking 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning at night, rowing in his boat across the lake, and he'll stay there for like hours on end, and he'll be rowing back. And they also reported strange smells coming from the other side of the lake. Well, actually, that day that I went back to the lake, there was another guy on the very far end with 2 dogs, and I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know who he was or none of that kind of sort. But it turns out that the guy was a private investigator, and he was there to investigate, of course, what the people were reporting that lived around him. So his call and my call actually came in at the same time. Like when he found what he found, and when we experienced what we experienced, me giving them the license plate number and his call was enough for them to track the guy down, go to his house, and everything. And that's when they sent the SWAT team. So they had a whole standoff in the streets, and they sent a guy in to talk him out, all of that kind of stuff. And it lasted for at least 2 hours. They arrested him, yes, peacefully. They didn't arrest him like, throwing him on the ground, anything that we have seen them do with black people. They went in, talked them out, all this other kind of stuff. But the reports say that when they went into his house, he had just an arsenal of weapons. Like he used to be a soldier, so I guess you could say he was a veteran. And of course, being that, you get to keep, I guess, whatever weapons I have, however many hell weapons you want. But they went into his house and there was just an arsenal of things. They was like, it could basically, just the walls covered in it. It could basically supply an army. Um, but yeah, and they arrested the guy. We spoke with some of his neighbors. And actually, one of his neighbors whose house isn't there anymore, they moved away. He actually confessed he was a member of the KKK back in the day. And, but, he just grew up, he changed, and whatever else. I don't know that story, but he was just saying a lot of stuff. But he, at one point, was saying that he was trying to just kind of get to the guy, get some understanding, but he was just too far gone. And even the guy's son didn't want anything to do with him because he was just so ingrained in, this. But going back to the private investigator and what he found the guy actually discovered a small shack, like it was hand built, on the other side of the lake. And there was enough meth in the shack that could pretty much blow off that whole lake. So the reason the guy used to go over there is because he was cooking meth on the other side of the lake. He had a little meth lab. So if you know how the lake is set up, there's this huge, I guess it's about half a mile lake. And then there's like a little road that you can get from the other side of the lake. And there is a ditch that goes in down. It's kind of like a swampy area before you get to the interstate. So in that swampy area, in that ditch, they found this little shack that he'd go and just cook up whatever kind of drugs, and this, that, and whatever. So on top of the meth, and they usually say that there are two types of people that tell the truth. There are, well, actually, a couple of people. There's kids, drunk people, and people that are pissed the fuck off. And I find that people that are under the influence oftentimes tell the truth, just, all out. So he was under the influence of drugs, but at the same time, his whole personality of being just this really racist guy, racist man, it was a dangerous combination. So, and on top of the things that he had, but I thought about it that night, and this was a really, I understand that I put myself in danger, you know. I I just remember sitting in the dark room thinking about my life and how that could have been it. Um, you know, but was it worth doing? It was. Sometimes the hardest, things worth doing isn't always easy. And who would have known how much further this guy could have gone had it really not been for, somebody to just say, look, I have to put a stop to this. I have to. Now, the private investigator, even if so, there probably would have been processes and steps and whatever else to, get this guy behind bars. But the fact that he was going around harassing people, he actually harassed prior to, this is what my neighbor was telling me, that he had heard about the guy when I had described him about my encounter that day, that there was the peg leg guy. He literally had a peg leg, guys. Like, literally, I can't make this shit up. And no shirt on, yellow sunglasses. So the guy that he heard it from said that his kids were out walking around the lake when they were harassed by this guy. So you can imagine, like, how much worse it could have been had somebody not intervened. But I did think about myself that day, and when you're in the moment of some of these things, you don't really think about it. It just kind of happens. You're like, I'm gonna do this, and even if so, and I did realize the consequences before, when I was the possible consequences when I went out there. But I guess it was that young side of me of thinking that I was invincible or something or whatever, and just trying to be brave, or I don't know. But yeah, so that was my first true racist encounter. Um, Growing up Memphis, Tennessee, with just in that environment. So it happens to you whether you are rich or poor, or because you can, those are things that can be earned or gained and even lost, but you cannot just lose your identity. You cannot just lose your race. You cannot just lose like your skin color and who you are, and those things will follow you throughout your life. um so yeah. So, with that being said, I actually never got into the sentence of the guy and what happened. I know that I'm not sure what happened all on the legal perspective of things, of what happened and his exact sentences, but I do know somewhere in there he ended up being on house arrest for some period of time. Some of the neighbors around said that he did some type of servitude or community servitude. But other than that, I don't know what his jail time was or none of that type of stuff. Going into how he was treated, because we stood there and we watched the whole thing from beginning to end, and going by how he was treated, they actually sent a guy in to negotiate him out. Um, and, they just peacefully arrested him, put him in a squad car, all this other kind of stuff. A lot of people will say, oh, it was because of his age. He was like 70 or something like that. And I'm like, no, I highly believe that it was because, he was white. Had this been somebody, and I say that because of my next story that's coming up and how, you know, but you'll see. And I say that because of this. But yeah, they arrested him pretty peacefully, and his sentence, I know he had just some type of house arrest because I actually rode my bike around, just riding through the neighborhood, and he just so happened to be out. This is when I let my dog usually off the leash, like when I ride my bike. I know this was back when he was whatever, but he'll run beside me, everything. And he ended up kind of on that street and just walking by, and the guy came out to his mailbox, and I could see the house arrest bracelet on him. So that part I can validate was true. But yeah, has this experience made me afraid of white people? No, it has not. Has this experience made me look at white people any differently than I had before I experienced it? To a certain degree, but not entirely. And I say that because I am aware, you know, but I'm not afraid. And I don't want to be afraid. Like, I am aware of the possible, you know, the possible personalities that might come out of this. But am I just going to be afraid of them simply because they're white and I'm just going to assume that they're racist? No, I don't assume anything too much of anybody. I mean, true, you can look at somebody sometimes and tell if they're, healthy, or tell if they are, unkept or taking care of themselves or something like that. But can you completely look at a white person or a black person and say, well, that's a thug or that's a racist or that's not really? No. So it has made me aware that there are possible ones that are out there, and I will encounter again, which I have later stories. Um, but I'm not going to live my life in fear of that. And I say this too because I hunt and fish. And a lot of places that I hunt and fish are out there in those rural areas of Georgia that you drive. It's almost like driving down a dirt road and you see those little rinky dink gas stations and all that kind of stuff. I'm constantly in towns like that, and all I see are white faces. And those are pretty much probably like tight knit type people that know each other in the communities and all this other kind of stuff. Places like Monticello and whatever else. And I go through places like that. And honestly, since living here in Georgia, I haven't experienced racism. But like I said, I know that they are there. but I personally haven't. And when I'm out there in the woods and I'm hunting, all I see really are white men. But have I ever had, any of them be racist to me? No. Actually, a lot of them want to help me drag the deer out of the woods. They'd be like, please let me know if you find it. I'll be glad to help. I got this in my truck. And they be wanting to try out their new tools and all this other kind of stuff. And then, they'll tell me about hunting areas. Oh, they got some really good deer or fishing spots down there. They got some really good whatever, and they're really chatty. And a lot of them are very surprised to see a woman of my statures out there because it's something very unusual to them. And, it's just like, weird to them. But at the same time, great. I don't know. But, um, so like I said, I haven't personally experienced that, and that hasn't made me any fearful of white people just because of that encounter. Um, Now, will I meet that one asshole that want to try something? Possibly, but knocking on wood, I never do because come on, we both have weapons out there. Um, so, like I say, it's just it's kind of a hit and miss. You weigh it out, just kind of where you can, and just it's probably old to say and probably cliche, but you do treat people how you want to be treated. Um, and I don't want people judging me just because I have locks, which that's another one of my stories. Or, any other perspective of me. So, yeah, it's just, it's that, I'm aware, but I'm not afraid. And just take it at that.